Hey, and welcome to the live demonstration of my WebExpress app. It uses HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, JavaScript, jQuery, Node, and then, of course, Express to be able to create a full stack experience for your user. Basically, it's just a survey. It was made for the Northwestern Bootcamp, week 14, when we're going through Express, which is a framework for building a server. And it takes in information from your user, which is turned in through a survey, compares it to a pre-populated list of answers, and then matches them with their best matches. In this example, this is a Good Place themed one, so they're going to be getting characters from the Good Place. Just to show you how everything works, you can see on the front end it's really basic. Use a little bit of Bootstrap to be able to build this out. The go-to survey is the first one, and I'll just open these up so you can see them. But we also have the API friends list so you can see who's built in, and then also the GitHub repo. So let me show you this first, but this is just like your people who are already in here, people we could potentially match with. And every time the user submits answers, they actually get added to it as well. If you wanted to check out the code, you're more than welcome to head over to my page and pick through that. But I'll show you what it looks like when we actually put information. Over here, you are asking your user for a name, an image. You can just put dirty code in there. It's not going to mess anything up. But for this one, we have our drop-down menus, and we are asking the user to, you can see in the instructions, rate how much or little you agree with the following statements with the drop-down scale, and then just a little bit of a joke for any of you Good Place fans out there. You could spend eternity with Derek if you end up answering wrong. So you can see here, they just go through, they answer to the best of their ability, and then down here you've got a submit button. We used native HTML to build out the drop-down menus as well as the validation method which we used, which was actually a feature that's included in native HTML, which is the require feature, and it automatically validates the answer and won't operate the code unless the user has submitted everything. So we're just going to go through, we're going to make sure, and then we're going to press submit. And it's going to give us our match, who is Eleanor. So that's super cool. Eleanor Shellstrap, everybody. I'm going to put that down there until a little bit later, but we'll definitely come back to it. I'm going to show you the HTML. So here's the HTML for the first page that you saw. We're just using the latest versions of Bootstrap and jQuery. Bootstrap actually just came out with the 4.13, and it messed me up a little bit because I was using the old one built into my snippet. So for all of you Bootstrap users, just something to keep in mind, especially if you're watching this right now in December. The second page, the survey HTML, there's a little more going on. So you saw that we were using the HTML features for form as well as select and then option, which can be used within the form. And then, of course, the required to make sure that we're validating our answers before turning them in. You can also see down here that we included our submit button within our form so that it automatically takes care of the submit process if it is included in the form, which is also a nice little feature that is a part of the native HTML coding. And then, of course, we use the Bootstrap modal feature to be able to pop up our match after we had submitted our answers instead of having to use something like alerts or pop-ups that we would normally use in this situation, just to make your website a little better looking and a little less sketchy looking. Over here, you guys can see the friends.js is just simply where we're storing our JSON package of our pre-rendered friends who are included. And then in the survey, this is how we're deciding to take in our answers, and then what kind of parameters we put around them. And then over here, you see that we're using jQuery to tie the submit to an onClick event, and then store that information down here with our jQuery and using the IDs that we assign to our questions and then capturing those values as well as the name and then photo within a data structure that we're calling user data. Down here, you can see that we are then exporting our user data so that it can be tied in the back end. The reason why we made this decision to kind of split up our stuff like this is just so that like you don't know who's going to be using your page. You don't want them to have access to your entire database, so it's just better to kind of break up what code you're going to be doing on the front end and then the back end, or at least be thinking about those things when you're making these decisions. In this case, you can see all of this is going to tie into when we're using our modal, and then also how we're going to be matching the name and the images when we do take that information from the JSON and populate it to the screen. You guys can see some notes I made to myself to finish my README and then deploy to Heroku. Good cat. In the server.js, so this is a little more front-end stuff. We're working with our dependencies and then also our paths. So the paths and dependencies that we're using are Express. So Express is, like I said before, the framework that you're using in order to be able to build your server. And then path is how you are creating paths from your different HTML pages through your server. So you see that we're going to be requiring them down here, and we'll see them put into play a little bit later. And I'll make sure to show you that. NodeMon was the other dependency that I required. Basically, it is a node module that will automatically reset your server every time that your code is updated or changed. And it just saves you the hassle of having to do that manually. And if you need to express like I am and constantly making changes, it makes all the difference. So I highly suggest using it if you haven't, or if you're thinking about it. On line 7, we're just putting the express function into an app, and then on line 8, we are taking our port, and with that little piece of code that says the process.env port, it's like, hey, if there's a default port, go to that, but otherwise, if there's not, go to 8080. The rest of it is just express data parsing capabilities, so setting those up. This line of code actually on 11 is quite important when you are displaying static HTML pages, and that will actually be what allows you to do that. So you can see we're giving access to our app/public HTML pages so that once we deploy, those can be rendered. Down here, we're just letting the code know how we want it to use our data and then return it to us, and then we're just getting access to the API and HTML routes. Over here, that final little piece of code is just going to give us a little console if our server is up and running once we decide to run that. And then finally, in our API routes, you can see this is where we are doing the heavy lifting. So let's see, did I show you this? Yes. So you saw on the front end how we were taking the information and we were storing it, and then here's where we're actually doing the comparison. So on top, on line 2, we are requiring our friend data. So that huge package that we had filled with our friends, we're bringing it into this page and we're loading it into a variable called friend data. And then down here, we are taking that data and we're rendering it as a JSON package. And then we are using it down here, and we are creating a few more variables. So our user score, which we're filling with our answers that our user provided for us. We're creating a scores array. So this is where we're going to be putting in the differences between the different arrays. This is where we're going to be actually comparing them. And then a best match score. So those best match scores are going to be dependent on which person you get back. We loop through the friend data length, and then we create from that like a score difference, and then we take the score difference and we add it to or we loop through the user score and we give that a value, and then we take the score difference and then we just create another array based on the difference between those. You can also see that, interestingly enough, we use the math.absolute function in order to be able to get rid of negative numbers and just simply focus on the difference between the two numbers to give you the truest count. And then you can see down here we're pushing the score differences onto our scores array, which we'll be comparing in just a little bit. Then we loop through the scores array to be able to find our best match. And then from the best match and from the that we get from our friend data, we find our soulmate. And then down here, you can see that we are pushing our new friend data to the actual body. So once we deploy to Heroku, we'll actually be able to add every person who comes and takes a survey to our database so that they can be compared the next time someone puts their stuff in. The kind of caveat to that is if you take the test more than once, you have an opportunity to match with yourself. So the last kind of function just empties out the arrays at the end. But I'll go down to the terminal and I'll show you how our guest just kind of comes in. So you can see this is the corresponding code. So I used node mount server. And then with the app listening on the port, that lets us know that everything is working. And then this is the answer, or this is the object that we actually collected from the guest so that you can see how that matches up against our friends JS. In this case, it worked out because we were comparing things that were exactly the same. It gets a little tricky if you're trying to compare things that aren't the same, or maybe one object has variables and the others has numbers. It becomes a little more tricky to kind of go around all of that. But in any case, that is my first Express app. I hope you guys liked it and found it worthwhile. If you want to poke through the code, you're more than welcome to. My GitHub is KAT3NG, and leave comments on it if you guys have anything. Always looking to expand my horizons and get better. All right, thanks so much for watching. It's been a pleasure walking you guys through my project. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care.